Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening. We're here to really ask you guys, what can you do to act? How can you make a difference? How can you leave here and make sure that you do something with the knowledge that you've learnt today? And that's basically what we want to do. We want to tell you about the impact that we've had from last year's summit and inspire you to act and see what you can do.
Thank you, Chris. You obviously tend to work sometimes, so there you are. And obrigado, amigo. NIAS is a quality assurance agency which has around 200 ELT centres, both in Australia and overseas. And about a year ago, I was sitting exactly where you are now, thinking to myself, well, here we have a cause which is doing amazing things. And what can I do with the people that I'm working with to make a real difference? It's easy to sit and listen, it's easy to be inspired, but to actually take the resources we have at our fingertips and mobilise them, I think that was the challenge which I sat where you are right now and bent my mind to. And frankly, after being inspired by some of the things that Kristy's about to share with you now, I think you'll probably feel very much the same.
So this is one of our tale of 10,000 textbooks, and I just wanted to start by giving you a little bit of an idea about what Voice does and what we presented last year. So Voice is an Australian charity, but we work directly with people in crisis in Cambodia to help them access their fundamental human rights. So we provide food, shelter, healthcare, safety, education and sustainable employment to people who are in crisis. Our aim is to get them from crisis to independence so they don't need us anymore. And that's a very fundamental part of what Voice does.
NIAS is all about quality in education, and of course, who delivers the education but teachers? Teachers are an incredibly motivated group of people. They've also got a very strong sense of social justice. One of the challenges which has been in the media over the past 12 or 18 months, I think most of you may have come across it, is this notion of volunteerism in Southeast Asia. If you're not aware of it, Kristy will certainly share a bit more of that in a few moments. But fundamentally, my sector was a great supporter, or is a great supporter of volunteerism. This idea of going into various communities and contributing cash and other services, perhaps not always in a place and in a space where it's going to do the most good. And so when NIAS met Voice, one of the challenges that we saw needed to be overcome in terms of the ELT sector, not just here in Australia, but through its, I guess, regional influence, is how to re-educate people about the right way to help. So volunteerism was firmly in our radar, and we started thinking about more productive, more constructive ways to provide assistance to the clients who are involved with Voice.
And I guess that's a really big point to make, and I made it last year, but to make to all of you, that to make sure you look at what your skills and your resources are and your connections and try to think about what you can offer. Don't just go and be voyeuristic and see poor people or pretend like you're helping, play with a few kids and tell everyone on social media that you've done all this great work. Try to look at what your skills and resources are and put them to great use. And this is what NIAS and Voice have really tried to do. We've tried to utilise the resources that each of us have had in order to make the biggest impact. This is some of NIAS's partners.
We work with universities. In fact, Sydney University indeed is one of our quality endorsed members. We have leading group of 8 partners. We have global multinationals who are involved with us, polytechnics, TAFE colleges and private schools. The common thread through all of those is that they're helping to provide people with access to a language. English is the ASEAN adopted language. I'm sure many people here would be aware of that. It is something of an avenue for people to find a future career away from, I guess, what you might call poverty. So fundamentally, the ELT sector sees itself as one lever to help people to alleviate poverty and improve their lives.
So in my work, crisis has many different faces. It's never one form of crisis. There's never one way of getting to a point of crisis, and there therefore is never one solution to a crisis. What Voice does is listen to people. We understand how they've gotten there, and we listen to them and try to empower them to improve their lives in the way that they want to. So this is how we give people a voice. We listen to people and we try to create individualised solutions for them to get out of crisis. So Voice is a really small charity, but we make a little bit go a very long way. So we operate on about $100,000 operating costs per year. And with that, we help over 400 people in crisis. We have a community crisis centre and people come to us with all different types of needs. We provide thousands of meals to people that are hungry. We provide emergency housing for the homeless. We provide access to professional medical care when it's needed. These boys, for example, need blood transfusions every single month and wouldn't be able to get that unless they knew voice, because there's a huge blood shortage in Cambodia. So we also assist people into safe employment, and we offer kids the opportunity to get off the street and into school, and we work with the families to try to provide the children with these options, because often the kids need to be working, and it's easy to just say, let's get them off the street and into school, but it's really important for us to work with the families as a whole to try to find a solution for the parents and the carers to earn enough income so the kids don't actually have to work. But this is kind of where NIAS and Voice really tried to work together to try to get better access to education.
And indeed, this is where the story began. So NIAS took the idea of an industry partnership to Voice. Voice agreed to accept that partnership, and we then decided to start promoting the relationship between NIAS and Voice to our members. Now, the way we did that, we used social media. We use an industry newsletter which goes out each week. Around 6,000 people receive that each week. We have readership of around 25% of that newsletter. So it's a very powerful way of getting a message in front of people who care. And we started telling the right story. The right story is not about going to an orphanage, paying the person, $50 to spend an afternoon doing finger painting with the kids, or giving them a toy from someone you bought from a vendor out the front, which will just be sold back to the vendor out the front that afternoon to be resold to the kid. It's an unbelievable thing, this volunteerism. You need to find out more about it. This was a very practical intervention. And we started talking to people, and the donations started to come in, but they were not coming in very quickly. It was really the sort of, you have a lot of passion when you start these journeys, and you kind of want everybody else to buy into that passion. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you've got to keep throwing yourself against the wall. So what we did is we sat down with Voice and said, how can we mobilise the membership in a much more collaborative way? And that's where the story of VANAC came into play.
So when I first met NIAS, the first thing that came to mind when I heard about the resources that they had and the membership of schools across Asia was VANAC is a boy that I met when he was about 8 years old. He was about this big when I first met him. He's now nearly 17. But we've helped VANAC get on and off the streets many times over his lifetime. So he's been working since he could walk, to be able to support his family. And his mother had passed away. His dad is an amputee, so it finds it difficult to work. And so he's had to work in order to keep his family fed and sheltered. And we've worked with him over the years to get him to help his family get other income opportunities, but he's gone into school and dropped out many, many times. The last time I met with him at the beginning of, not the last time, but when I met with him on the street for the last time, it was this picture here, and he was 17-ish, that nobody really knows their birthdays. And we were talking to him about getting him off the street and into school, but the reality for him is that we had gotten him, thanks to Voice, to about grade 5. But if he were to go back to school, he would be in the same class as a lot of 10-year-olds, which is quite embarrassing for a 17-year-old to be in class with a lot of 10-year-olds. And this is his reality. And so he was not really that keen to go back to school, and he really wanted to learn English, to give him the opportunity to work in a restaurant or in a field that would cater to the tourists, which is a better paying area. So immediately I thought of VANAC, and thankfully NIAS was able to coordinate a scholarship for VANAC to go to one of their partner schools in Cambodia, and he has now got amazing access to English language education that he wouldn't have had before. And you can see the difference in VANAC. This is after he'd just started studying, and the hopelessness that you can see in people's eyes when I come across somebody in crisis. And I've seen VANAC have this look in his eyes many, many times. It's to see the change in even just the way somebody looks. You can change their life by giving them access to education when it suits them. And in Vinak's case, this is exactly what he wanted, and we listened to him, and Nias helped us achieve that. And from that, we got the partnership has just escalated.
Yeah, Vinak was the pebble, I think, that started the landslide. So for the first time, people could identify with and understand what the partnership was about. This story was obviously appearing in our weekly newsletters and through social media. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we took a phone call from one of our sponsors who said, I've got 10,000 textbooks that I'd like to donate to Voice. How can they use it? We're inspired by the story of Vinak, obviously what his achievements are. How many more Vinaks are there in Cambodia? Are these resources going to be helpful? Now, 10,000 textbooks is a lot of material. It wasn't just textbooks, it was DVDs, it was learning materials, it was all sorts of things. And I think you can see from the picture here, it was almost 3 cubic metres of stuff. It was 1.5 tonnes. Now, how you get 1.5 tonnes from a dock in Melbourne to Cambodia?
Yeah, I mean, my first response was, how am I going to get it there? What am I going to do? How am I going to store it? What am I going to do?
There were a whole range of issues, but we sat down and looked at it was $185,000 worth of resources, a huge donation, and we thought we can't turn this away. So we started to build a story around that. We called it the Tale of 10,000 Textbooks, and the next thing we did is we reached out to the membership and said, guys, how are we going to get these resources to Cambodia? All of a sudden, University of Queensland jumped in. We'll throw $3,000 at this. Will $3,000 be enough to get the books to Cambodia? Of course, Kristy was saying, yes, that would probably go part of the way, but there are issues to do with getting books off the dock. And then, of course, I don't know if any of you have dealt with developing nations, but there are often certain ways things need to be managed. So we had to look at ways to make the grease of the wheels go into effect. Actually, I don't know if anybody met the director of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He's already been bailed up in the hallway on the way out a few minutes ago. So his guys hopefully are going to help us get those books off the dock without the usual gratuities to the local merchants. Then, of course, we had the other issue of, well, where are we going to store 1.5 tonnes worth of materials? Kristy doesn't have a huge warehouse, and I was fascinated to hear the story earlier on about the clothing. Where was the clothing going to be stored? And, we think about donating. We don't think about logistics. Logistics is half of the challenge. Moving things from here to there is where the problem often stops things from happening. So our member in Cambodia, the Australian College of English, jumped in and said, we'll give you storage space. That keeps the books away from moisture, it keeps the books away from theft, and all of the usual challenges of, I guess, looking after a brand new resource which can be sold on the street for a percentage of their price are now going to be resources that can be used by Kristy and her team.
And so I guess that's what we wanted to talk to you about today. Be aware of what your donation is. Be aware of what you can do to help, and make sure you do it. Don't just sit there passively and take on information and be inspired inside. Make sure you act on that. And I guess that's what we really want to urge you to ask yourself. How can you, what resources, what skills do you have? What connections do you have that you can use to make a difference?
A year ago, none of this existed. A year ago, I was sitting where you're sitting, wondering what I could do to help this amazing woman with her amazing team. And a year later, we've probably raised plus minus $190,000 worth of resources to do something very, very practical. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge today. And Kristy and I talked about this. It's a wee bit controversial. Everybody has a smartphone. Today, everybody can log on to that smartphone, pick one of the causes you've come across today, donate $10. Okay, if everybody here donates $10, there's 300 of you here, you'll raise $3,000. Okay, we're not going to plug Voice for this one, we're going to keep it open for everybody today.
But it is just...
But don't leave the room without making a small... Kristy will always pump, as she should. Have a think about that. This group can produce, just by that one action today, quite an amazing outcome from SGS 2016. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.